Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Enlighten Up podcast. Today I'm super excited to introduce you to Daniel Mangena, and he is a filmmaker, an author, and speaker. And today we're going to talk a lot about abundance, but we're going to get into some psychedelics. We're going to get into interdimensional experiences. You have a lot to share. It's going to be super fun. Daniel, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm groovy. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the flexibility on the time zones.
Oh, you know what? We
this
just
whole three-dimensional time thing,
yeah.
Who needs it? Who needs it?
Who needs it? Time doesn't even really exist, does it?
Exactly.
Well, you and I, we met through a very interesting first experience. I just had Pamela and Lisa on the show, and Pamela did her first channeling with us in that meditation group that we were part of. Mm-hmm. How was that for you, experiencing her?
I love a cheeky bit of channeling, so I'm all about it, to be honest. Count me in. Oh, there's some channeling. Can I have my ticket, please? Yeah. I think I wasn't into it. And then a friend of mine was like obsessed with getting me into this one particular channel. And he kept trying to push this guy on me for a long time. And I was like, oh, dude, whatever. And he goes, no, please just check out.
Is it Yannick?
No, it wasn't even Yannick.
Okay.
This is pre-Yannick.
Okay.
So my mate gets me into to read this book, and I'm literally, this is a channel text, and I was like, whoa. And then I went to one of the guy's events, and I was like, oh my God, I can literally feel the energy in this room right now. This is really creepy. And then someone else introduced me to another channel that I'm really good friends with now. I was like, oh, okay, this stuff is really dope. Okay, yeah, I like the things. So since then, I've been a convert. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like all the things channeling. Awesome.
Bring it.
Well, okay, your spiritual journey is very interesting, because tell my audience kind of what you do right now, like what your kind of expertise is based in, but then we'll kind of drop into, I guess, well, we all have a dark period that really opens us up to what we're here to truly do. And you're no exception.
Yeah, so now my mission essentially is empowering people to understand a very simple truth that for the most part we're disconnected from, and that's that abundance isn't something that we have to hustle, kill, and take out the competition for. It's actually our natural state, but because we become disconnected from it, it's up to us to accept the invitation to step back into it. And so whether we're producing film, I'm an investor in a studio called Abundant Studios. I've also got my own production company, a media investment company. Whether I'm speaking, podcasting and whatever, it's really taking these opportunities to connect with people and just to bring them back to that very raw truth.
And what did you think abundance was? Have you always thought that it was this natural state, or did you believe it was something else?
So I've been an entrepreneur stroke value creator stroke wannabe business person for as long as I can remember. Like I was that kid that had like a car washing service and breakfast in bed service. And I had a tuck shop at my high school. I taught myself to make computers at 13 years old, and I was selling those through newspapers. So I was always kind of getting in. So it wasn't really a surprise that I made my first million when I was 19 years old. So I had financial success quite early, but I didn't have other pieces to what I now understand the abundance puzzle to be. Far too often, we've got people who've got a lot of money who are not abundant at all, and people who have got a lot of everything else, but don't have sufficient resources to live life on their own terms. So they're not abundant either. So a big part of what I end up doing is either taking people that have got the money piece and showing them that that's not the whole of it and bringing them to the middle to see the rest of it, or taking the people that got the rest and helping them to understand that money is still an essential part of the abundance puzzle, and you need resources to live life on your own terms, and supporting them in connecting to the flow of those resources into their life too.
How do you deal with people when you're talking about the latter? Because there seems to be a lot of resistance around the ideology of money, the concept of money. You know, in religion and spirituality, there's been a dirtying of money and its own energy. How do you help people overcome that?
By helping them to see the truth. The people that spill those stories to you have got the most resources.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, right? And it's so funny. I was just literally speaking to my publicist just before this call, and we're looking at, because I did a TED talk that they refused to publish, and so we're looking at another topic, and the topic that I'm looking at is poverty isn't as moral as you think it is, and that's a potential angle that we're going to be going into. And I had a very visceral experience of this myself about a year ago. I had someone come and speak to my community, and they're like, "Oh, money isn't the most important thing, but my community is about financial abundance. That's what we're there to talk about. Oh, that's not the most important thing. Dan, I know you like to focus on that, but I want to talk about everything else." But that same person is depending on me to financially support their charity. So it's like, let's put it into. We can have all of the conversations we want about it, but let's come down to the brass tacks, right? If we don't have resources, we don't have the means to do anything. Money doesn't buy happiness, but your happiness shouldn't be something that can be bought anyway. It should be something that's coming from inside of you. But in the same breath, the things that will be a part of your life that is happy anyway, that you enjoy, that you want to do, cost money.
I see money as an amplifier.
It's an amplifier.
If you're happy, it's going to amplify your happiness. If you're miserable, it's going to amplify your misery.
If you're lonely, it's going to amplify it. If you're full of joy, it's going to amplify it. I mean, I'm very, very blessed through people like Yannick, our friend Yannick. Like, I'm in his Mavericks community. All of us in there are all millionaire upwards business owners, but we're all fun-loving, happy people that want to contribute. And I'm blessed that I actually get to spend time with people of financial means that understand that financial means isn't the only thing and are nice humans. I think when you look at media, when you look at a lot of portrayals, and the fact that people have placed a lot of focus on the handful of not so nice people that have got money, we all kind of get painted with that brush. When there are people out there who have created wealth, who have done so by adding to humanity and being a contribution, who have done so in a way that actually supports people in living a better life. I mean, this conversation that we're having right now, the ability to share this with our audiences is happening because someone created a business and they're being financially rewarded for that through profit, right? We're not complaining about that.
And don't you think that the narrative of, like, we know there are some not so nice people who have a lot of money in this world and don't do some very nice things with that. We know that. But to really anchor in, to hook yourself into that narrative, to me, it's a bit of a, it's a way to continue to stay exactly where you are. It's almost like your victim. It's a way to be the victim without ever challenging yourself to go beyond that. Like, well, this is what's going on, so I'm not going to use money because look how they're using it. But I always say, I've been saying this for years, if you want to change the vibration of money, change the way you intend to use it. Intention is everything. When you do anything in this world, your intention will absolutely carry and magnify what you're doing and strengthen it. So why is it any different for money?
And also, I mean, much to your point about money being an amplifier, if you're a good person, it's good for you to have money, because then you're going to be adding good energy to the collective frequency of money. It's going to take more people who are good people stepping into financial abundance and adding to that field.
Yes, that's exactly how I see it. And that's how you shift that frequency around it. Because I don't deny that it's not, I know that it's there. We all know that it's there. It's because it's happening, but it's not the only thing that's there. It's just a matter of, like, you look at this population of the world. Yeah, there's not some nice people in the world, but there's some incredibly helpful, loving people in this world, way more than there are bad. And so how do we raise the consciousness of humanity? Is like, we focus on ourselves and we start shifting ourselves. And then by modeling it, it just it spills over and it becomes a tsunami wave. And
there's a to take a slight tangent off into an aligned topic from what you just said, trying to change other people isn't what's going to change the world. It's more people focusing on changing themselves, because we can't effect direct change in someone else's reality. We can only effect direct change in our own. And so, pardon me, by focusing on how we're showing up and what we're contributing, we're actually going to create more change than trying to change how other people are contributing to the collective field.
Well, and just from an efficiency standpoint, it's a lot more efficient to change yourself than to try to change everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, one of in my book, Stepping Beyond Intention, which we're actually re-releasing, I got a book deal to re-release it. It's happening in the new year. But in my 4-step model, the first thing is accept that I'm the author and creator of my life. And much to your point on efficiency, the foundational principle underneath all of that is something I call common denominator theory, in that there's only one entity that's been present in every single experience of my life and will be present. Your mum was there at the beginning, but she might not be there at the end. And she's not going to be there when you're in the bathroom, unless it's really weird. Right? You may even have an identical twin, but they're still not going to be there with you all the time. And even if you're a Siamese twin, they're not going to be there in your thoughts at all times. So you're never going to have anything other than you that's common in every single experience. So the only place where efficiency ultimately lies is in accepting the responsibility to make change within yourself. If you do that, the substance of everything that you relate to, those relationships are all going to change as a result.
Yeah, exactly. So what brought you into that dark period that you went through that kind of really shifted how you started approaching just really life, your work?
So I made a lot of money when I was 19, promptly lost everything because I didn't have the licenses for the business that I had. I went off and made another fortune, and then that all got stolen. And then at some point I had to realize that I didn't actually know everything and that maybe I wasn't right about everything.
How old were you when it got stolen?
23.
Wow. You went through some really big experience.
I made and lost it twice by 23. And the thing is, I got into this kind of information, esoterics, mindset, conscious creation, about 15 or 16 years old. I stumbled into this information. I got really deep into it about 18 when I read a book called The Midas Method by Stuart Goldsmith, who became one of my first mentors. I then backtracked through that book and looked at all the books and source material that he had read and got all the way back to a book called The Science of Getting Rich. And I leveraged the information in those books and made my first million very, very quickly after that. Really? Yeah, but here's the thing. I now, one of the principles I teach now is something called the flow funnel, right? And the flow funnel invites us to look at the fact that reality is constructed in different levels of density. We've got the density where light moves at the slowest pace, which we call physical reality, what we experience with our senses. But then we've got thought and mind that's above that, because you've got mind over matter. So you've got an area of density that has an impact over this one. But then even when you look at the law recognizes crimes of passion, in that your emotional state has an impact on what you're actually doing at a thinking, which then impacts what you're doing at an experiential. I didn't have physical experience of what money was supposed to be and how to handle it, what licenses that you need. And I also didn't have the life experience to understand that as a young man, I needed guidance and support and mentorship, and thought that I knew everything because I'd had success so young. So I made mistakes that meant that I was naive in terms of who I would relate to. I didn't get the right legal counsel because I didn't understand that you needed legal counsel. Again, arrogance of youth. I thought I knew everything. And then at the top of the funnel, I hadn't had any experience holding the frequency of money. And I didn't understand the importance of cultivating the frequency of holding money. So one of the reasons why lottery winners and people who have windfalls, within 5 years, 90% of them go back to exactly where they were. Why? Because they haven't had the physical experience, they probably haven't changed their mindset, and they definitely haven't had the vibrational experience before. And so it can't sit in your field. The law of vibration, one of the universal laws, says we can only experience what we're vibrational matched to. So if I don't have a vibrational experience, I'm physically going to be unable to hold that level of experience. And that's what happened with me. So taking the time out, coming through my dark space, which I'll go into now, but coming out of the other side of that, having spent a lot of time really focusing on more than just, because my mindset was unassailable. I've been working on it for years, and I had an arrogant level of self-belief. I just didn't think there was anything that I couldn't do, which is great at a certain level, but not great on another level, because then you don't have the openness to receive because you just think you know everything. But it did mean that I did have the mental vision to hold it. and the focused mind to actually create those thought forms that became physical reality. But again, I didn't have the containers physically, and I didn't have the container vibrationally in order for it to stay. And my identity was tied up so much in the ability to create and being the guy that knew everything, that when that was gone, I didn't think that there was anything left to live for. And unfortunately, I went into a deep, dark place of suicidal ideation.
Okay. So, I mean, you lost $1 million twice.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty expensive university degree.
Yeah, pretty.
Because
pretty.
you definitely went to the hard knock school.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, so your financial degree is definitely from there. What was your first feeling when you got stolen from? Because that's a lot. Like, that's a massive betrayal.
I laughed at first and then went into complete horror, because it wasn't, because you got to understand at the time, and I don't really want to go, there's certain things I can't really go into, but it was other people who impacted as well. So for example, my lawyer got kidnapped and they like tied him up and like got access to bank accounts. Yeah, it was a really, it wasn't just someone just like stole codes. It was a really messy time that impacted other people. And so I had all of that guilt and stuff on me as well. And that's why I was like, oh my God. And that's when I went off into a funny place. Yeah, it was a really messy time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll let you take it from there then.
Yeah. So yeah, sitting there, and so what actually happened, the people who stole from me actually called a meeting and came to tell me, oh yeah, by the way, yeah, we took that. And they had one of my old business partners there, like literally at gunpoint. Like, yeah, so we've taken everything he had as well. And yeah, it was a very
it's
messy
like a movie.
Yeah, it's like a movie. Yeah. I thought about
No, you should. Anyway. No, you should. I know what you're thinking. You should.
Certain sleeping dogs should be left to lie, you know. So
it's almost like, okay, I know it is. You don't want to reawaken that vibrate. Like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, you know, but I came off of that and I was like, wow, because I didn't realize how messy the situation had gotten until I realized, oh crap, like this is a really bad situation. And oh my God, I wasn't right. Because what you have to understand as well, Nicole, is that I was really arrogant at the time. As in, I thought I knew it all. I've got the cheat code to reality. You can't tell me anything. I know how to create anything that I want, because I was experiencing a lot of real-time manifestation. Like my manifesting, and it wasn't called manifesting at the time. That wasn't really the popular term, but my ability to call things in, like, yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I was just knocking it out of the park consistently. So when you have this punch you in the face, slap you on the ground and stomp on you realization that you don't know everything, and all of my identity was tied up in being the guy that knew everything and had, you know, I was this rich, you know, I'd done it when I was young and they tried to take it from me, like, but I made it again and look at who I am. And it's like, wow, maybe I don't know everything. And there was this complete loss of identity that happened in that moment.
It's like the mansion of illusions you were living, your ego was living in, just got shattered.
It shattered, burnt, and pissed on all at once.
Okay.
And I'm there, just in there, watching it burn and feeling the urine of the universe all over me.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, oh, wow. And there was a complete, it wasn't even an ego death. It was an ego decimation. Like there was nothing left. Now I'm really blessed in that I wasn't diagnosed with Asperger's until about 3 or 4 years later. But I truly believe it's because of the way that my brain's wired, because of my Asperger's, that I didn't just go off and have the reflex action to go and try and attempt suicide. My brain works very logically in steps. And so I stopped. I was like, okay, there's nothing left to live for. Let's commit suicide. Let's stop being a pain and stop being a burden on people. But because of the fact that I was in England, you know, you can't just walk up and get a gun and, you know, do yourself in. I was looking at my options, and as I looked at my options, I couldn't see anything that I felt confident I could pull off. I was in such a state and feeling of losership, to put it, you know, it's the only way I can put it, that I thought if I try this, I'm going to fail. And that is the only reason why I didn't actually make an attempt. If I try to hang myself, I'm going to be a burden to people. If I try and swallow pills, someone might find me and pump my stomach, and then I'm going to be the loser that's in the hospital bed that people are looking down on. If I try and cut my wrists and I get it wrong, I'm going to have cut marks forever that are going to remind me of what a loser I am. I couldn't think of anything that could work. And so I went off to de-loser myself. So my journey, this is wow. So the beginning of the journey that you meet me on today, that we meet each other on today, was how can I work out what I got wrong with all this reality creation stuff so that I can pull off my suicide successfully? That was my mission. It wasn't to fix myself or to get back into a happy place or to rebuild my life. It was, how can I ensure that I have a successful suicide attempt? And that was my entire mission.
Okay, there's a couple things here. First of all, your Asperger's like saved your life.
Yeah, 100%.
That's incredible. But this really kind of, in a very dark and morbid way, kind of really hones in on how we always think we have the plan we know we need to execute. Like even in this moment where you thought you knew, it's like, okay, I know this is what I'm going to be set out to do. But really the true plan, you had no idea how it was going to really unfold. And this is what stops so many people from actually starting. Is they think they need to know all the plan. It's like, you don't need to know all the plan. You just got to start. And like eventually through taking steps, more pathways start to open up that you didn't even know were part of your option.
And even I'd even take that a step further, Nicole, in that we don't have the conscious processing power to be able to see the plan.
It's true.
One thing I always remind people is we've never even seen our own face. Now, someone will say, I have. No, you haven't. You've seen a reflection, a picture, or a video. You've never seen your own face. I don't know what I look like. I know what the camera has captured of my face or what the mirror has captured of my face in reverse, but we've never looked upon our own face. Never. I've never seen my own backside.
You want us to tell you?
And yet, those of us who've not seen our own backside presume that we can understand the workings of an infinitely complex universe. There are billions of people in the world right now, each of them having their own experience, and each of them could be a tool that the universe could use to bring us the unfolding of our manifestation. On top of that, you've got all of the other moving pieces. You've got nature. You've got all of the ideas and conscious thought forms that manifest from other people's choices. There's literally billions and billions and billions of unknown variables moving at any one snapshot in time. And we, who don't even use 5% of our brain and have never seen our own backside, presume that we can map out a perfect plan.
And that's how the ego wins. It's so good at masking the truth. Because it's true. When you put it into that perspective, it really dials it back and allows you to really understand how much trust we have to have in the unknown. And that is a deeply spiritual part of this human experience. And without it, I just don't feel like you can get very far.
We can't get very far because, again, we just don't have the processing power. We don't have the processing power. We don't have the pieces. And yet we keep trying. We keep trying to. We keep trying and trying and trying. And then we end up stuck in all of the pain, stuck in the torment, and stuck in the realization of the truth. We didn't have it. No. We didn't have it locked down. We didn't have it worked out. We didn't have any of the pieces that we thought we did. And then when we end up facing the truth, we turn around and we start blaming other people, right? Oh, it's because of the government. Oh, it's because of COVID. Oh, it's because of the devil, if we're going to go into religion. It's because of demons. It's because of this. It's because of my past life. It's because of my soul contract. When actually, no, it really just comes down to choice.
It's always choice.
And the one thing I've really been playing with that's really deepened my own journey over recent time, and the way that I share my work is I get these concepts, I play with them in my own life, and then it moves out first, some of my inner circle peeps that work with me, and then it kind of makes its way out and trickles down, and we get the evidence and that those case studies as evidence to play out. But the one I'm playing with right now is just this one line that I keep reminding myself. Everything that I'm seeing right now is the perfect manifestation of exactly who and what I'm being in this moment. Mm-hmm. And if there's ever anything that I want to change, I just need to remember this is just the perfect reflection of what I am in this moment. If I shift where I'm at in this moment, then that must change also. Mm-hmm. And the deeper and deeper and deeper I go into that, the quicker that I'm seeing things change. And so when we stop trying to control things and just get really clear on what we want to create and the relationship that we have to that as an internal frequency, as an internal set of beliefs, as an internal set of choices in terms of what we're going to do and how we're going to show up, we'll never fail to manifest what we want to create.
Amen. Right before we actually started this podcast, like before we got on to record, I literally had a plan or an idea of what I thought's a path that I was going to be going down. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, I got a couple text messages and I was like, oh, maybe that's not going to be the plan. And then of course, the first thing was like, well, what am I going to do now? And then I quickly stopped and I said, Nicole, you don't have all of the information you need right now to know what the outcome is going to be. But all you do need to know is that you have plenty of resources, you have your heart, you have your desire, you know how to execute certain things. So just keep doing what you know how to do and just keep turning over rocks and, just keep choosing. And as long as you stay in action, in your own life by choosing to be proactive in following your dreams, some things are going to start to reveal themselves without you even realizing. Opportunities will start to come in because you're vibrating in a place where you trust yourself.
And again, the future hasn't happened yet. And the future isn't going to happen until we've made those steps and points in time in between now and then. And we can end up in any of an infinite number of directions in those moments that happen between now and the point that we're trying to calculate. So back to your point about efficiency, it just doesn't make any sense to try and jump ahead because what we're looking at as what the future is going to be, there's all of these unknown variables that are going to happen between now and then anyway. So the next steps cannot emerge until we've been present enough in the current step. The next steps will not emerge until we've moved through the current steps. And so if we focus on the current steps, we can then be more present to see what the options and opportunities are in the next steps. And that actually allows us to be more efficient and more in alignment with what we want to create going forward versus getting lost in fear, anxiety, or excitement, because excitement also pulls us out of the now of a future that hasn't even got the foundations of it yet because we haven't even reached the steps before it.
So you're planning your suicide. And you're going through all the different ways. So when does it start to shift for you?
I don't know when it did shift, Nicole. What I know is I then realizing that I'm a loser. And if I try this, I'm going to fail. So I need to be loser. I spent the next couple of years completely obsessed with not being a loser, trying to understand what did I get wrong? Where did I misunderstand? Where had I been lied to or cheated or stolen life force by me being taken down the wrong path? And my only focus for about 2.5, maybe 3 years was books, tapes, conversations, audios, everything that was in relation to conscious creation, the lives and times of people who had done great things to understand what was BS and what was not. I taught myself to transliterate Hebrew and Arabic so I could read and study ancient texts for what they were. I was going all out, studying ancient religions, and I completely got obsessed. And I know that in March, the back end of March 2015. So this is all 2008, right?
Okay.
2015, I got back from a trip to Asia with my cousin. I got back to my lovely home in London. I looked at my life and realized, oh my God, I hadn't been thinking about suicide anymore. That's when I realized I had a business that was making 6 figures a month, that I was working a few hours a week to maintain. I was living life. I was in great shape. I had great relationships with my family and friends. I was traveling. I was like, oh my goodness. Whoa, what happened here? And that's when it struck me that I'd set out to do one thing and I ended up somewhere completely different. And this is really what the TED Talk was about. The TED Talk was titled, What Suicide Taught Me About Life. And it really went through understanding that ultimately I had positively polluted my field with a consistent quality of energy and input. So it's physically impossible that I'm still going to be resonating a place where my thoughts and intentions were down here. And what that also really helped me to understand is it doesn't matter what I'm consciously choosing, my field is always going to win. My frequency is always going to win. And when your frequencies are tuned consciously or unconsciously to any quality, you are going to experience it. Again, we're experiencing the perfect manifestation of our field. In my instance, I had a dark intention, but I had light, uplifting inputs. And so it was physically impossible that I could be in the space of the intention and not experience something that evolved from the field and the frequency that I was at. And so what then the game became for me was reverse engineering that journey and seeing if there were any replicable points so that I could move more deeply into that consciously. Mm-hmm. I found a path that has worked for me and has now worked for thousands and thousands of people around the world to create the life that they want to create. And that's the work that I get to do now.
Incredible. Really incredible. And you know, this is one of the things that I always tell people too. It's like so much of your purpose is found in your pain. Mm-hmm. Like, and I just literally put out a podcast a couple of weeks ago, from the time of like the people are going to be hearing this on really, it's understanding your relationship with the darkness, because your relationship with the darkness is not about fighting the darkness. It's not about fighting the darkness of this world. It's not about fighting the darkness of your own world. It's about changing your relationship with that darkness. And once you shift the relationship with the darkness, you can now actually work with it, and you can find a lot of the value and the beauty that it beholds. And I think so much of us, we avoid our own pain. We avoid our own darkness. We don't want to look there because we don't understand that beyond the pain is a treasure trove of purpose, which everyone on this planet seems to be craving right now.
And I just want to touch on the point you just said about fighting the darkness, because this is one of the things that I see with people that want to be activists and want to be, you know, I want to fight for these rights. By fighting with something, you're actually just maintaining your alignment with it vibrationally and keeping it in your field.
It's so true.
Anything that you're fighting, you're affirming. If you're affirming it, you're keeping it in your reality. Activism doesn't end anything, it reinforces it. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, and it sounds like what about, you know, there's so many rights that people have got right now in the world. You know, we've got rights based on, we've got religious rights with the whole Kanye West thing that's happened recently. The trans movement obviously has, you know, that's been embattled. We had the Asian hate that was really bad last year, like in terms of it being publicly spoken about. Black Lives Matter has obviously been something that's been ongoing for many years. Then we've got the All Lives Matter movement in combat with that. Now we've got politics and Democrats versus Republicans in the US, and we've got Ukraine versus Russia, NATO versus Russia, East versus West, crypto versus fiat, all of this combat. And all of this combat is just keeping things where they are. Nothing moves forward if everything's being kept in this spiralless loop.
Well, the thing, you know, here's why. Because when you're fighting for something, you instinctively and unconsciously don't believe you actually have it.
Agreed.
So you are holding the vibration of, I don't have this. So you're only going to create more of, I don't have this, versus if you chose to just shift your perspective, and this is where it comes back to choice, and why choice of perspective is one of your greatest allies in anything that you face in your life, is when you realize that as soon as you change your belief structure and you perceive that, you know, that although the reality may be showing up one way, you can still believe that you have it and choose to find other ways to express it. You know, through our own expression of it, we become it, which means then you have to attract it to you. It's just what you were talking about earlier about, you know, once you are holding that frequency and that vibration, you are a match for more stuff to show up in your life.
And again, I want to make sure that listeners understand I'm not being I'm not being insensitive to any of the plights of people who are in these situations. And many people are taking the stance of fighting something because that's all they understand. And a lot of people are in deep pain. There are people who are really subject to hate. They are subject to violence. They're subject to death and the fear and the threat of death. I mean, we did mention about the war that's going in the east of Ukraine at the moment. And yet, the solution, as counterintuitive as it sounds, doesn't care about your feelings about the thing.
No.
Right? Reality doesn't have an opinion about how we feel about something. It's just creating what we experience on the back of what we're feeling about something. It doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't believe that NATO is wrong and Putin is right, or Putin is right and NATO is wrong, or whatever. It doesn't have that opinion. It's just perfectly reflecting our frequency as form. And so when we understand that the universe doesn't care about our feelings, and that Dan and Nicole having this conversation isn't trying to be insensitive, it's actually trying to give them an alternative that might be better suited to create solutions that are going to move you forward, then there's power in that. And there's going to be confusion, there's going to be some uproar, there's going to be some calls for cancellation, I'm sure of it. And yet the answer does not lie in more conflict and combat. It lies in consciously creating a new field that will always perfectly be reflected in new circumstances.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a very difficult concept to grasp when you're so emotionally invested in your plight. So, and I totally understand that. I've been there. I think we've all been there to some degree.
We all go there. We all go there at some point about something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But at the end of the day, from what I've experienced in my own life, and it sounds like you've also experienced, is knowing that the solution that we truly desire for the outcome that we believe we want is likely too great for our mind to fully consciously understand in this moment. And so you have to be open to alternative paths. You just have to be open. And it's not about what you believe is right. It's about what is truly best.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And as we've been saying, I want to make sure all the listeners understand we're not being insensitive to the pain that people are going through. We're not being insensitive to the threats and the shadows and the real things that are happening for people every day. We're simply saying that it doesn't add up, that the approach to getting out of that is to hold yourself in the frequency of it by continuing to fight against it.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about, shifting perspectives and allowing yourself to have a different experience than you've ever had, because that's how you learn, right? You've had a few experiences with psychedelics, a Bufo experience.
Yep.
What was that like for you? And what motivated you to, or inspired you to go there?
So, I mean, I've always, okay, to backtrack. When I was 19, I was initiated into a mystery school, and I was being trained to be a teacher in a very deep esoteric mystery school based on ancient Egyptian teachings and sciences.
Oh, you and I are going to have to talk later.
And I ended up moving away from that school because I didn't agree with some of the philosophies. I didn't agree with, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't really agree with. And so I ended up walking away from it a couple of years later. But I did learn a lot and really came to understand a lot of the foundational principles to reality, how we play with it and the dance of that, right? And also understanding how a lot of other shamanic mystery schools and esoteric schools functioned in terms of the way that schooling happens. So plants and other natural medicines, generally speaking, you go through certain levels of initiation before you are taken into deeper mysteries that you access through those. A few years ago, obviously, things like ayahuasca got very popular, and it became something that people would do. I mean, here where I live in Mexico, I know people that go every month to go and do their ayahuasca, and they have ayahuasca birthday parties or whatever. And for me, that's quite sacrilegious.
No, I
because
agree. I was just down in
yeah,
Mexico in
yeah,
June, and for my first ayahuasca experience, I couldn't believe there were people who were doing it every Friday night.
yeah. It's and for me, I suppose it's because I was brought into this world with a certain respect and level of tradition to how things function. And so I didn't agree with the concept of, and this is not me telling other people what they have to do. I'm just saying for me personally. All right. Yeah. Oh, you just go and do, you just go and do a thing. Whereas for me, it's no, you go through certain levels. And the way that I always aligned it was going into the gym day one when you never lifted any weights and shooting up steroids. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Right. You do your natural. And then if you reach a point where you can't go any further, then you're using performance enhancement versus I've never lifted a dumbbell, but I'm going to go and juice up. It just doesn't.
It's like
you're doing
you
yourself a disservice
for what you want to experience. So if you're going to go into deep preparation, whether it's like you're going to run a marathon or you're going to, perform at the sport, you go through extensive training to get that big win or, to get that medal, to get that championship. And that win, though, the experience of it means so much more because of the effort and the preparation and the hard work and the sweat and tears that you put in. And so when you just like do it like, just willy-nilly, like, oh, I haven't really done any spiritual work, I haven't done any much healing, I'm going to try this plant, and you know what? That's an experience. That's a journey.
Yeah.
Like,
and there's no judgment to people's journey.
But you've got to understand what you're going to experience out of that is going to be very different than what someone who's taken the time to prepare and,
put the work in.
Yeah. Put all the work in.
And there was just a lot of shortcutting that I was seeing. And so I kind of ended up a little bit anti, not for other people. Again, I'm not talking about other people's experience. I'm talking about for me personally, because I was well aware of the fact that I hadn't really hit my natural potential. And so therefore going to dive into something that I understand from a different perspective. I understand those medicines to be the thing that you use once you've reached the height of a certain level of mystery to move into inner mysteries and to have a different level of perspective. Then you start to connect with nature in that way. And so I'd never been called to it, despite the fact I've had as much opportunity as anything. And then I was talking with one of my friends I connect with. He's a mentor of mine. We connect on a weekly basis. And he shared with me he had an experience with microdosing. And I got so in human design, I'm a sacral generator. And so I get a hit in my gut when my body's sharing with me that this is the path to go on. And so it sounded like something to follow. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do it, but I followed the breadcrumbs on it. Anyway, I made a few calls locally where I am I wanted to find a real shaman that I could sit with and at least have a discussion about this, not just, going online and ordering it. And so I was connected with one, but he wasn't around. And so it took me a year before I could actually have a sit down with this guy.
Oh, really?
We had a sit down. Yeah, it took a year because his travel schedule, my travel schedule, all this other stuff. So we had a sit down. We met at a coffee shop. He was having a mango smoothie. I had a lemonade. Weird detail. I've got Asperger's. Leave me alone. And then, and I had some stuff that was quite heavy on my heart at the time. Now, I was looking at microdosing to actually enhance my mental capacity for problem solving, to help me in my business and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't looking at it from a spiritual perspective. But if I'm going to touch something that does have spiritual application, I did want to have some spiritual guidance around it. And it was really funny that he looked at me and he said, I don't feel that you need to microdose right now. I feel that your system could do with a tune-up. I would suggest this, this, and this, and these are the things that it would help with. And he outlined a protocol and then listed, without me saying anything, so he didn't cold read me, every single freaking thing that was on my heart that I wanted to work on, he listed in order, near enough in order. Boom, 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 boom. And I was like, okay, that's not a sign that this right. And so the protocol that he suggested was 3 rounds of Cambo over a 21-day period. And then after the 3rd Cambo to go directly into Bufo. And for the first time ever that had been brought up as something to do, I had a whole full body yes. And then my logic had the thing of him actually listing the things. And so we went off and did it. And that's what I did.
Okay, before we get into your experience, like what happened there, because that's a very interesting experience.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make a note here because you said something that I think it's really important for people to understand when it comes to following your gut and your own intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just because you get a yes in that moment doesn't mean it's a full yes on what you think you're saying yes to. It's you're meant to follow it, and that there might be something else down the path that you need to explore that you weren't even aware of. And that's the thing that you're being guided to.
100%.
So you just, I want to make that clear, because I think sometimes we get caught up like, well, I thought this is what I was supposed to do. How come it didn't turn out wrong? It's like, well, no, like maybe there was something else that came through that you're supposed to be looking at right now that you didn't even realize.
I mean, I've seen that in so many parts of my life. I mean, right now, I'm no longer with my son's mother, for example. And at the time when we first met, I didn't really see anything romantically there. It kind of grew over a period of time, got into it, and then it felt like it wasn't really what we were supposed to be in. She became pregnant with Ethan. We gave it a try, and it turns out we're just better as friends. We get on amazingly as friends. We don't really align on a romantic basis. And yet that full body yes that I had to dive into it with her, although she wasn't a forever person for me, if that's what you're into, I do have my beautiful son, right? And so the yes did lead to that. And there was an experience once in my life when I had a full body yes to get into a relationship with someone. And really it was just to understand certain parts of me that were going to be awakened by being in that connection. And again, we ended up being friends and we didn't even really get into a full relationship. We kind of just kicked it for a little while, but it was to awaken certain things. And yet when I pendulumed on it, when I like followed this on it, everything said yes. And it felt like this was, oh my God, this is a forever person, but it wasn't. It was just for me to open up to certain things. And again, going back to what we were saying earlier about not trying to work out the future steps, just look at what's in front of you and what you're being guided to say yes to now.
Exactly. Well said. Very well said. And I think that's value. That's very valuable advice there for people to understand when following your intuition and learning how it actually works. Because I think we get way too attached to the outcome we're looking for. And we think a yes right now means that, oh, it's tied to that outcome. But it's, there are so many things along our path that we have no idea that could be getting us to that outcome. But we want to just think that we want to pull that outcome into the present moment. And it's like, it's now. It's like, because I want it now. So it's got to be now. So you have the Bufo experience. Tell us what happened with...
So I've heard of Bufo before and friends of mine that are into it or whatever. And you can't really put it into words. The only thing that I can describe it as is getting to high five God and then watching reality reintegrate piece by piece, frame by frame, as you come back from that experience. That's the only way that I could explain it. It was...
Is that all?
That's all. And it was for me, I see people that have these amazing insights and they have these, and I understand why people get addicted to the experience because it was profound. And I've made a conscious choice to wait for clear alignment before I ever touch anything like that ever again. And it was really just giving me this perspective of watching. The key thing for me with that was watching everything reform. It's like I literally watched atoms build into compounds that built into things and watched light emerge and watched reality re-emerge in front of my eyes. And it was like, oh, wow, this really is just a cosmic game. And everything's doing that all of the time. And actually, if we slow down enough, we can be a part of the process of what is unfolding rather than being a slave to what unfolds and calling it fate.
Yes. Yes. Because that's the victim mentality right there, like that is someone who doesn't believe they have free will, which is a complete lie. So you have this incredible experience and with Bufo. How did this affect your meditation practice, your experience with other realms? Like,
I mean, I've always been into the other realms stuff anyway. So I wasn't waiting for this to, and again, this is why, people, oh, if you have ayahuasca, you'll get to meet Mama Aya. It's like I could meditate and go meet Mama Aya. I don't need to.
No, it's true. I mean, it's true because before I took my Aya, I just connected with her and she started communicating to me. She started showing me stuff that like, this is what's going to be coming up, or this. And I mean, she truly held back because it's interesting though. But because it was just a pure detox on
Yeah.
my end. But I mean, there was definitely a lot of unconscious purging, and things shifted that I had no idea how. I don't know how the medicine really truly works, but it does. But you absolutely, and I think it's really important, is to know that, you know, now even having the experience, well, this is, okay, you had the experience, you now have a vibrational match to, in a sense of, okay, I know what to work with now. And the same thing for me using psilocybin this past summer. I did 2 journeys with psilocybin. And now, because of the music that I was listening to, that I purposely put together on my own playlist, every time I listen to it, it transports me back into that kind of same moment. And I start grabbing information, and it's like I can recreate a lot of the stuff that the mushrooms have helped open up for me. So for you, I know, though, that we talked briefly, and I'd love to get into this. You know, you've had some interdimensional experiences with different beings. Like what's that been like for you?
So again, going back to my training in my, you know, early 20s, like 2021, I was cognitively taken through an understanding of why interdimensions work, how they're structured, how we connect even lineage wise to different dimensions and beings that operate at these different levels. And so the concept of interdimensions and interdimensional beings is not some weird fantastical thing for me. It's a very science driven fact. And so mainly through meditation, I've had multiple experiences of these different dimensions and also the beings that operate them. And part and parcel of my personal work and stuff that I do with people more on a one-on-one basis is building frameworks to be able to consciously at will go and have those communications and conversations, and building the structures to be able to do that. And so that's something that I've done on a regular basis for counsel, for guidance, for direction. And also I had a recent experience. I went to the temples of Damanhur in northern Italy. I actually was invited to go and lead a retreat there, which I'm doing in June of 2023. And even when I was there, like, we arrived on the grounds and I saw statues moving. Like, one of them turned, I could see in my mind's eye, and I turned and looked, and one was walking across. And it was funny because the exact statues that I saw moving were all made by the same sculptor. And there's something to do with his name that also ties in with one of my names from the mystery school. So that was a funny sort of kind of crossover.
Okay.
Yeah. But even like looking at the fact that this physical reality plays off of blueprints that operate at the dimension of thought form, right? So the dimension of thought imprints into physical reality and slows down and becomes physical reality. And even when you look at what we're doing now as humans, creating the virtual reality and the metaverse, where we're creating another dimension. And for example, what they're doing right now is the Sims game. They're working, they may have done it already. I was reading that they're working on injecting or inputting artificial intelligence into the game player so that they won't know that they're a computer game. They'll think that they're real. Yeah. And so there's this whole level of reality that we're then going to be putting on our Oculus or whatever and dropping into the metaverse and engaging with these artificial intelligence, virtual reality entities that think that they're real. And so, like, what is there to say that that's not what this reality is? And there's much evidence to suggest that it's something to that effect. Even when you look at what the ancients say about the whole concept that's become popularized as coming to Earth for the weekend or whatever, or reincarnating or coming from the field of light. And so all of that to say that this whole game of dimensions isn't really that outlandish for me. It's something that I play with on pretty much a daily basis.
Yeah.
Even the way that I create my reality is using interdimensional dancing, going to the realm of thought and using that realm to create the imprint of what I'm creating in physical reality. So, but yeah, I've had some really cool stuff with like being just popping out of nowhere, grabbing my feet and stuff like that. And sort of
what
like
kind
you
of
just sort of doing it, but I mean, just they're there, really. They're not, I mean, sometimes you can have like a physical experience, but it's always going to be an interpretation that's based on your...
so it's like you feel something pulling your feet, but you don't know
like
what...
physically something's pulling my foot. And there was, there's been times when, I've been in meditation and, being just pops up in front of you, just having a conversation and telling you some stuff or whatever. But also you've got to look at your, the way that you connect with your intuition, which for me is just our senses that operate at a level of non-density. So I'm claircognizant. So I tend to have just a visceral knowingness of things, not necessarily an audio or visual. It's just like sort of get instantly downloads. But different people will have different ways that they'll connect with that level of experience. But ultimately, I just want people to realize it's a real thing that's measurable to some extent as well. It doesn't have to be a sexy, drug-fueled journey.
Well, I remember back in, I think it was 2014 or 15, I was in meditation and I felt very alone. I was having a really rough day and I was in meditation. I was just super sad about something. I just felt really alone. And while I was in meditation, I was kind of communicating with my guides and my angels. And I just said, I really need a hug. I just need to know I'm not alone. And I kid you not, I didn't see because well, my eyes were closed. But I felt angel wings wrap around me. It was so distinct. And I just burst into tears because one, I was heard and answered. And two, it was one of the most beautiful experiences, but it's true. And that's when we're kind of piercing the veil and we're allowing ourselves to experience beyond this current dimension and allow other dimensions to reach us. And I think when your intention is so pure, that it makes the connection that much easier. Yeah.
Because we don't sully it. We don't sully it with ego. We don't sully it with our programs. We don't sully it with our stuff, with our trauma and our wounds. It just can become this pure connection.
Yeah. And in this case, for me, I was always someone who showed like I had it all together. Like I never showed, vulnerability. And in that moment, I was so vulnerable. And I just let it all, I've like, just kind of showed it and spoke it to the universe. And I was heard. And I think it's that letting go, that surrender of everything that you think you are or need to be, and just allow whatever is truly in you in that moment to be expressed. I think you are more likely to be heard and answered to just because that vibration is of pure allowance.
Agreed. Great.
Okay, so I know we have a hard stop, so please let my audience know what you like, the names of your books, what you kind of got going on, and if they can reach out to you, like where can they find you?
The best thing to do is just, everyone can remember this, head to dreamwithdan.com. All my social media links are there. All of my books are on there. Links to my podcast. I write for a couple of magazines. Information about my movies. Everything's on there. My events that we do. Dreamwithdan.com. Very central place where you can find out all of the things.
Thank you so much, Dan, for coming on the show. I'm going to have you back. So I think we can have some
We've got more conversations to have. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you love this episode, please leave me a review on Spotify if you're listening on Spotify, or on Apple if you're on iTunes. Greatly appreciate your support. And please share this episode with anyone that you believe will benefit from it. Dan has left some very valuable information here that penetrates well beyond, I think, the normal advice that we usually get. Have a great evening, and I'll be with you guys next week. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.